Hush. Series 5.
Okay, I'm gonna level with you guys. I originally shot half this video last week on one of the hottest days of the summer before my camera battery died. When editing the footage, I realised that while my commentary isn't great, there's no denying how hot and unfocused I look. Mostly because, well, I was hot and unfocused.
It's really warm.
But the opening was quite cool and I can't be bothered to reshoot it, so here's me 3 days after when I wanted to get the video out attempting to make something better. Enjoy! Hello and welcome to a brand new video, and this video will be a similar sort of style to the Justice League video where it's just me talking in a mic about something. This one will probably be a bit longer because it's something I really am passionate about, unlike Justice League, which is a film. If you've watched my channel for a while or maybe even just sort of stumbled upon it, you'll probably gather I am a huge Doctor Who fan. My room is mostly Doctor Who stuff. I'm trying to shake it up a bit with some other stuff, but yeah, it's mostly Doctor Who merch, Doctor Who artwork and figures, and there's the Lego set up there. Yeah, it is my favourite show, my favourite franchise, just my favourite sort of fictional world, ultimately. But I wasn't always this way. When I was a young boy, as Gerard Way once said, I was terrified by the tiny glimpses I ever saw of Doctor Who. I didn't grow up with it when it came back. My brother and sister were into it, but I couldn't bring myself to watch it. I remember the voice changer helmets of like the Cybermen really kind of terrified me. In fact, how's this for coming full circle? There's a Cyberman voice changer helmet right up there, and there's a Dalek one down there. Don't ask me why there's a Dalek helmet or how that even works. It just looks weird when you wear it. It's like it's not supposed to be. Anyway, I did see a few bits. My brother and sister would be like, "Oh, this one's cool. You might like this one." I remember seeing Blink and like Runaway Bride. My earliest memory of Doctor Who is seeing a little bit of The Unquiet Dead. At least that's the earliest I can place. It was the line, "I saw the fall of Troy, World War V, and now I'm going to die in a dungeon in Cardiff." That was the line. I remember seeing that. But there were zombies, so I probably walked out. But then, around late 2009, I did get a little more into it. I watched a few more episodes, and I sort of understood what regeneration was and how there were multiple doctors. And I knew that another regeneration was just around the corner, in The End of Time. So on New Year's Day 2010, I sat down and watched The End of Time Part 2, and in those final moments, I had no idea who was going to turn up. Like, I didn't follow any of the speculation. I just knew David Tennant was leaving, and we were going to get a new Doctor. I didn't know who that could have been. Apparently the favourites were people like Robert Carlyle or James Nesbitt or Patterson Joseph. All three would make really good Doctors. But no, we got Matt Smith. There he was, right on the screen, this crazy sort of manic Doctor crashing the TARDIS right down to Earth, and then Doctor Who would come back in the spring. So I think across those weeks and months, I probably got more and more into it, kind of watching more episodes I could find, and being really hyped by the trailers. There's this amazing one they did. They shot it in 3D, actually, because it was aired in front of like screenings of Alice in Wonderland, the Tim Burton one. And it's Amy and the Doctor falling through this wormhole full of like Daleks and Weeping Angels and Smilers and all these sorts of creatures. And I remember at the very end of it, that was like, "Doctor Who, The Journey Begins, Easter on BBC One." For a while I thought The Journey Begins was like the subtitle of this series, like it was called Doctor Who, The Journey Begins. Of course it wasn't called that, although apparently there was confusion about whether it would be called Series 5. Basically, from a production level, it was called Series 1. All the production codes for the series started again because it was a new production team. So it was like Series, so it was like 1.1, 1.2, etc. So there was some debate about whether it was going to be called Series 1, but obviously it's called Series 5. So yeah, I think the moment I probably stopped being someone who watched Doctor Who occasionally to definitely a Doctor Who fan was when the 11th hour aired. I sat down, watched the 11th hour, and then immediately after, I ran out into the garden and started like pretending I was the Doctor, like making up my own stories, and I never really stopped doing that since. Series 5 of Doctor Who, because it's so important to me, I thought I should do a video on it, explaining in honour of its 10th anniversary, just how important it was to me personally and creatively. So let's talk about the series in general. It was Matt Smith's first series as the Doctor, and it was the first series under the helm of Stephen Moffat. So this was the biggest stylistic and tonal shake-up on the show since it came back. Even when Chris Eccleston left the show and we got David Tennant, the style of the show didn't really change. It sort of stayed fairly consistent. But in this case, everything was new. We got a new logo, a new title sequence, a new sonic screwdriver, a new TARDIS. This was the first time we'd had a new TARDIS in the new series. I know a lot of people think it looks a bit weird and just zany, but I wanted that TARDIS as a kid. That I was amazed that it was bigger than the last one, that you really got the sense this was a whole world in there. As a kid, it looks like the kind of place you'd want to live, you'd want to hang out there. And has all these little levels and rooms that sort of lead to places. It just looks so cool. One element that was quite divisive at the time was Matt Smith's casting. And I think that was mostly because, one, he was quite young, that he was the youngest actor to play the part, and the fact that he was replacing David Tennant. Like, just the most popular Doctor, maybe of all time. I asked on Twitter what people thought, and I got these lovely responses. Ew, this guy looks like an emo in high school. He's too young and funny looking. I burst out laughing when it cut to him on Doctor Who Confidential. Just this random bloke appearing out of nowhere, taking us all off guard. Even at the age of 12, my first thought was, no, he's too young. You're allowed to be an idiot at 12. You really are. Who the hell's he? I've never heard of him before. I was a real fan of the idea of them casting younger, and this is coming from me, number one Tennant fan, so I'm surprised looking back that I wasn't dreading the change. Also, I was 8, so I don't remember a whole lot. He was basically a complete unknown, he was the youngest actor to ever play the part, and he was taking over from David Tennant. So, just imagine the amount of pressure that was on Matt Smith, and right from the off, in the 11th hour, he is pitch perfect. Every defining trait of this Doctor is there from the beginning. The sort of calculated zaniness of him, and I say that because there is that element that some of it is an affectation, some of it is him just putting it on so you'd underestimate him, but he's also fiercely intelligent. You can tell that, especially in Series 5, where he does go off exploring a bit more, he does ask a few more questions, and he is very good at reading people in that first series. And watching it all these years later, I'm realising more and more I can sort of see Matt Smith's work process on screen, if that makes sense. Like, you can sort of see every move is calculated, every move is heavily scrutinised. It's him definitely trying to get every possible meaning out of that line. Even with that said, he makes it look so easy, and that's what the 11th Hour does really well. It's a complete relaunch of the show, but it looks so easy. This doesn't look like a first effort, which is mainly because it wasn't. This wasn't the first episode they filmed. They filmed the Angel two-parter before this to help them settle into their roles a bit more before the big first night. And even then, Flesh and Stone and Time of Angels, that doesn't look like a first effort. That still looks like they're very comfortable with those roles. So Matt's great. He does a really good job, just all around. He's great at the comedic bits, great at the more whimsical elements, and even the sadder, more somber elements, like his speech at the end of The Big Bang, when he really thinks he's going to get erased. And he's talking to Amy, you see all those centuries on his face. Despite his age, he's very good at getting across how old the Doctor is, and all that experience and sort of pain. He gets that across really beautifully, and I can't explain what it is about that, but you somehow buy him being the Doctor who's lived the longest. Ignoring the Timeless Child stuff, in Doctor Who canon, he is the Doctor who lived the longest. On his own, he lived for 1,000 years. That always comes across in Matt's performance. He's this very, very old man in this young, energetic hero's body. And Karen Gillan is also great in this series. It's weird saying that now because obviously we all know she was great. But you have to think back then, no one knew who Karen Gillan was. And since Doctor Who, she's been, I think, living in America. She's directed a film. She's been starring in lots of different things. And she starred in the highest grossing film of all time. So she's doing pretty good. You could see why Amy Pond became her, star-making role. She is from the off, she is really great. There's a new level to her first scene that I never really noticed before. When she's pretending to be the police officer, she's putting on a British accent. Not only that, but it's a very shaky British accent. It sounds very fake. And that's intentional. Clearly, that has got to be intentional. And her eyes are really twitchy, because basically when you think about it, what just happened was her childhood heroes just turned up again. She's knocked him out. She's trying to figure out what to do. She's got that costume to hand and just pretends to be a police officer. And her eyes being twitchy and all of that all works because she's so afraid. She doesn't know what she's supposed to do. And that's a great little level to the performance. And obviously she gets back into a Scottish accent, which she still sort of has, Karen Gillan. It's a bit more subdued, but it's definitely still there. She has great on-screen chemistry with Matt Smith. Like, them together is really fun. Because there's a bit of a love triangle there with her, the Doctor, and Amy. That makes sense. Her, the Doctor, and Rory. But that it doesn't play as big a role after Amy's choice. By the end of Amy's choice, she definitely decided no, she does love Rory. And I think Series 5 is definitely Amy's coming-of-age story. It's her growing up. She runs away on the night of her wedding because she's scared, and so she has these adventures. She brings her husband along, or fiancé along, loses him, realises how much he meant to her, and the Doctor even says in The Big Bang, you don't need your imaginary friend anymore. I think that would hit maybe a little harder if she wasn't the main companion in Series 6. Maybe there's a version out there where Amy and Rory are like recurring characters, sort of like how Martha came back in Series 4, but just in the middle, but wasn't like the main focus. And maybe River is the companion from the off. That might have worked better, but maybe we wouldn't have got The Girl Who Waited and great stories like that. I guess they don't really undermine this character arc, but it is, I think if it was just left here, it probably would be like perfect. But I like that she gets to go off with the Doctor and Rory in the TARDIS at the end on a wedding night. Speaking of which, Rory, I've got him actually. I got this little Rory figure here. It's I always thought it looked alright, but my sister saw it and said that looks nothing like Arthur Darvill. And the more I look at it, yeah, it's not a great likeness. I think he wore this set of colours. I don't have an Amy figure. I think they only did 2. But Arthur Darvill has really good comedic timing, but he's good at the more serious moments. Because he is kind of he's supposed to be the everyman on this TARDIS. Even Amy doesn't quite work as sort of the every person because she is quite fantastical. She's not an especially realistic character. But this whole series, it does have that kind of fairy tale quality to it. So I think if you read it through that lens, then she is more believable. But Rory definitely is the man off the street. He is the everyman reacting to this sort of stranger world. And Arthur Darvill does a great job of it, and you really do believe he loves Amy, which is how that the Last Centurion Roman element comes in, which now they're going to do on Big Finish. There's now going to be an audio box set that's just him, I guess, getting into adventures while he's guarding that box. But no, Rory's a great character. River comes back for the series. This is the first time she became a recurring role, and Alex Kingston's awesome. Apparently, a costume in the finale is meant to be like a cross between Han and Leia from Star Wars. And you can sort of see that. It's like the white coat from Empire, but with that kind of with the belt and sort of the belt with the gun and everything. That's very Han. All around, the cast is great this series. You get some really cool guest stars. Obviously, Tony Curran as Vincent Van Gogh, who plays it so beautifully. I know Van Gogh is supposed to be French, and obviously he's Scottish, but taking that out of the equation, he's just gives a beautiful performance. He's a very believable, while still being very fantastical kind of portrayal of this character. And it's a very emotional portrayal, but there's some fun moments. He plays it really well. You believe him as Van Gogh. And Helen McCrory is really good in Vampires of Venice. She's such a cool villain. I think she's one of the most underrated, like, Doctor Who one-off villains as Rosanna. She plays it so well. Even the character on her own is just really interesting to watch, that she does want to rebuild her race, but I like the fact that she sort of gives up even before Venice is about to be flooded. Once she finds out that the girls are dead, like the vampire brides, and that her goal is kind of gone. And she has that really great line of, can your conscience handle another dead species? And she's got great chemistry with Matt Smith. Like, that scene where they are just talking. I would say I ship it, but I'm not sure if I do. A little bit of me does. Ian McNeice as Winston Churchill, who is, especially now with all the Black Lives Matter stuff going up and there's all the statues being taken down and sort of reevaluating history. At the minute, Winston Churchill's quite a controversial figure. He always kind of was, to be honest. He's always been... because in the UK, we sort of treat him as like this really, really cool kind of like legendary hero figure, this war hero, when he did a lot of very bad things. Like, he was quite openly racist, looking at some of the things he did. But looking just at his portrayal in this, Ian McNeice does a great job, because the thing is, he's not playing real Winston Churchill. He's playing this fictionalized fairy tale image of him, which I know isn't a great thing to promote in a children's show, this kind of idealized hero figure of a very controversial character from world history, but well, he's not in the show anymore, so there isn't really... I don't think it's worth getting too upset about. But for what it is, Ian McNeice does a really fun job. He's kind of like the Brigadier to Matt Smith, even though he's only in a few stories. And I like the fact he comes back. Like, a historical figure who comes back. Like, the Big Bang in the opening scene is like Churchill and Vincent and all these characters from across the series. And it makes it all feel connected together. That reminds me, Liz 10 is also a really cool character. Sophie Okonedo does a great job with it. I like the idea that she says that she's been... she's grown up on stories of the Doctor, because obviously the Doctor's met Elizabeth I. So I like the idea that in the royal family, the Doctor is not only well known, but is kind of a figure of legend there. They're sort of told about him from a young age. All the cast throughout the series, I think, do a really good job. Everyone's really well cast. Everyone works really well with the main cast. And on a production level, I think this is one of the best looking series. This looks so good. Even though it was shot 10 years ago, but it still looks really good in HD. The colour grading is quite good. It's not... it doesn't look like it's been graded too much. It looks fairly natural, but the contrast is at such a scale where the blacks are quite dark and the colours really do pop. There's a nice sort of blue and purple colour scheme throughout the series. Speaking of colours, the Paradigm Daleks. These lovely boys. I know that they're very colourful and they're a bit big and cartoony, but... so what if they're cartoony? Look at these things. As a kid, I loved these. I mean, I loved the Strategist one because it was blue. I never got the Strategist one, sadly. I just stick with drones. But this is I like this design, really. I mean, if the colours were... they brought them back in Asylum with the Daleks and made them like metallic and a slightly darker colour scheme, and that looks really cool. If they stuck with that from the beginning, people probably would have responded to them better. And they don't do an awful lot in Victory, and by the time of Asylum, they've sort of been forgotten about. Now they don't show up anymore. Last time they showed up was in the Lego Batman movie, so that kind of shows that they've not really been... they didn't entirely stick with the idea of them being like the next level of Dalek. But we're getting a new Dalek design this Christmas, so, you know, as a toy, they look really cool. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe they just look better off-screen than they do whenever they're on-screen, which is probably defeats the purpose of them being on a show to begin with. Anyway, how about a few quick thoughts on every episode? 11th Hour, just a great opener. I think it is the best opener we've had since 2005. Everyone's introduced very well. I like that Amy and Rory when they first appear, are almost treated like background characters or side characters, especially with Rory, where he almost feels like a side character until he becomes actively involved in the story and comes back later on. I think that probably worked a little better at the time, because at that point, the last few episodes they'd had of Doctor Who, the Doctor didn't have a companion. So people could have thought, well, maybe these are like just side characters. There's all these great setups and payoffs throughout, like with the apple, which Amy gives the Doctor as a kid, and then he brings it back to her later to just as proof that he is the same man, that it is all real. And what I like about it is that throughout the runtime, you sort of gradually different bits of iconography from the RTD era are sort of stripped away until it's just completely new. So the TARDIS is disposed of very quickly. You see the Tennant era set exactly once in the episode, and then it blows up. The Doctor's in a very rough, battered version of Tennant's costume. You almost forget that is Tennant's outfit. The sonic screwdriver gets destroyed at one point. The final nail in the coffin, so to speak, is the Doctor stepping through the hologram of the 10th Doctor and just saying, "Hello, I'm the Doctor." And that is, as a kid, that was just like chills. I loved that scene so much, because that just cements him as the Doctor now. You pretty much forget from that point on that he was played by someone else in the last episode. This is just, it's a great setup for the new Doctor. It's a great origin story for him, and his relationship with Amy. It's all there, and every time you watch it, you do just want to see more. You do just want to jump onto the next episode and go on more adventures. The Beast Below. This is a controversial one. I don't really know people who hate this one anymore, but I'm sure they're out there. But at the same time, I don't see many people who really like it, and I think that's a shame, because I really like this one. I think Doctor Who magazine once described it as sort of Roald Dahl-ish, and I sort of see that. It's this very fantastical setting. It's got a great little monster, got Liz 10. The Smilers are cool. It's got these really fun little adventure aspects, like landing in the belly of a creature like this. That feels very much like a kid's kind of story. The Doctor's like joy of being inside that creature. That sounds wrong. What I do like about it, looking back, on a sort of thematic level, is this feels like the blueprint for Stephen Moffat's view of the Doctor later in his era. What I mean by that is, Stephen Moffat has said a few times that his interpretation is that the Doctor as an identity is just a set of values and ideals that the Doctor tries to live up to. So it's Stephen Moffat's belief that the Doctor isn't inherently never cruel, never cowardly, or all that stuff, isn't inherently a perfect person. It's just the fact that the Doctor aspires to be, and the fact that the Doctor tries so hard to be, that he is. That his choice to be the Doctor is what made him the Doctor, in a sort of metaphorical, thematic sense. And you see the blueprints for that here, even in just one line, where the Doctor says, when he has to consider whether he's going to kill the star whale or let everyone on that base die, he says that once he's done, he'll have to find another name because he wouldn't be the Doctor anymore. And that's kind of foreshadowing the War Doctor, in a way. That's the idea of the War Doctor, that is just this incarnation who doesn't consider himself worthy of the title. And this makes sense as a first TARDIS trip for Amy, because it explains why the Doctor keeps her around. He wants to know what's going on with the crack, which is explained to be the reason he took her with him. But I feel like this is the story that sort of cements her as his companion, and the idea that she is staying. Because she does make a pretty reckless choice there, but when she just lets the creature out, because she knew it wouldn't escape because it volunteered to help the human race. And she knew that because she sees the elements of the Doctor in the star whale. It's a bit sappy, but you buy it. It's a show about a space wizard intended for children. It's a fairy tale. It's sci-fi. It doesn't need to make sense. All right. That was taken from Patrick H. Willems, but it applies perfectly to Doctor Who. All the seeds for Moffat's interpretation of the Doctor are all there. Even that line where Amy asks, she asks, have you ever ran away from something because you were scared or you didn't know what to do? And obviously she's talking about the fact that she's running away from a wedding. And the Doctor says, yes, and I'm still here. So, obviously mentioning, obviously a reference to the fact that when he ran away from Gallifrey. And all of that this is stuff that becomes huge throughout the 11th Doctor's era, the 12th Doctor's era, and it's all there from Moffat's second episode of Showrunner. It's not one of the best of the series, but I really like it, The Beast Below. I think it's a good episode. Stephen Moffat apparently didn't like it for a long time. He felt it wasn't... He once called it a mess, which I think is a bit harsh, really. I don't really get why people don't like this one. Is it the logic? Again, it's Doctor Who. I don't know why you're expecting complete scientific accuracy here. But Steve Moffat has come round to it now. I think on Instagram he said that he watched it again and said, oh, I really enjoyed it this time. Victory of the Daleks. I've sort of talked about this with Churchill and the Paradigm Daleks, but I don't mind this one. I think it's one of the weakest of this series, but there's still some fun stuff there. A lot of people have blamed this story for how the Daleks are treated throughout the Moffat era, where they become less a huge threat and sort of more something that pops up occasionally, and the Doctor seems kind of apathetic towards them. But here's the thing, I think this story is the transition period between the Daleks being this threat that's rebuilding throughout the RTD era, and then being this threat that's just sort of around, and the Doctor can't really do anything about it. The Daleks win here. They reach the peak of their power with the Paradigm Daleks. They go off to rebuild their empire, and the next time you see them, they've got a full empire, and the Doctor just has to deal with that. Throughout the story, he's adamant that he wants this to be the final battle between them, that he really does want them just gone. And he has that amazing scene where he does just hit that Ironside Dalek. They are just going to come back, and I think he kind of just accepts that they're always going to be there. And that kind of explains his attitude throughout the Moffat era, where he is kind of apathetic towards them, where he is kind of, oh, here's a Dalek again, and he's not really afraid of them or terrified or anything. And is that regressive as a character? I don't think so, personally, but, you know, you're allowed to have your own thoughts on that. I think this one moves a bit too fast, to be honest. It moves very quickly. And maybe it could have worked better as a two-parter, but, you know, then we probably wouldn't have had the Angels two-parter. The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. Yeah, this is a really cool one. It's the first one they shot from the series, and it doesn't feel like that. There's a sense of confidence behind this script, the performances, and the direction. The Weeping Angels make their first reappearance, and they're just as cool. I like all the new abilities that they're given. Some would say that kind of demystifies them a bit or makes them a bit too powerful, but I don't know. I think they do some fun stuff with it. The whole image of an angel becoming an angel thing, that's a great idea. The angel in the video, that's just a great visual. And the angel in Amy's eye, like that is a great little subplot as it goes through, because I remember watching this for the first time and not really picking up until afterwards that she was counting. It's just done very subtly and don't really notice it unless you're looking for it. All the Angel Bob stuff is great. The bit where they intentionally try to enrage the Doctor by having Angel Bob say that he died terrified. Speaking of Angel Bob, this is the original Series 5 Steelbook. It was a limited edition, but I managed to find it years later in CEX for 10 quid, so screw you, whoever bought this originally. It's signed by Sarah Louise Madison, and Sarah is the actress who's played, I think, the most Weeping Angels. Really, she's appeared in the most amount of episodes. She first appeared in this one. She actually plays the angel in the video, actually, the Angel Bob Angel. She's played others in the Angels Take Manhattan, and I think of like cameos and stuff. Not the Class one, but she has done a few other things. And I met her a few years ago. She was really nice. She had really good memories of this. I remember her telling me that Matt Smith was really lovely, and she really enjoyed working on all these. Some people have this signed by Matt Smith, but I'm happy to have like Sarah's little signature there. So this was sort of intended to be like the Aliens to Blink's Alien. So it's the flashier, more like action-oriented sequel. And as a sequel to Blink, I think it works really well. I think it's a really cool story. The ending has always been a bit of a divisive one, with Amy coming onto the Doctor. I think the problem is that it's played for laughs. Like, there's some funny bits there. Like the Doctor's just complete obliviousness to what's going on, I think is quite funny. He does feel a little oddly placed. I don't know really how to feel about it, looking back. Stephen Moffat's actually said that he's not... he's very dissatisfied with that ending. That he thinks the problem is that he played it for laughs, and that the idea of Amy having gone through... This is the closest she's come to death so far, that she nearly died there, and that she sort of has this moment of not really thinking things through. But he thinks that the fact that he played it for laughs and in this kind of sitcom way was the issue with it. And yeah, I definitely see that. I'm going to try and get through these a bit faster now. So Vampires of Venice, I think, is awesome. I don't get why no one talks about this one. I think this is just really fun, quintessentially Doctor Who premise. The cast is great in this one. It's a good comedy episode. It's a very good, like, feel-good episode. actually. It's a very easy one to watch. You can just pop it on any time of day. It's got a great villain, Irizana. I love the design of the vampires, and I like some of the scientific explanations for how they work. I think that's really cool. Another cool villain appears in Amy's Choice, the Dream Lord, played by Toby Jones, who does a great job as this really slimy, like creepy version of the Doctor. And again, this is the story where Amy realizes she does love Rory, that ultimately she will choose Rory. I love the contrast between the two different scenarios, the freezing in the TARDIS and Ledworth, the two great contrasting locations, and they're shot very differently. There's some great comedy there. I think it's a really fun one, but it's also very poignant. Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. This is a really good two-parter. It's got a really good supporting cast. I love the mum character and Sean Elliott. I think that stuff's handled really well. I love the new design of the Silurians. I love how human they look and how you really can connect with these creatures, which with this story, I don't think it could have worked if you had the classic series Silurians. This story really does rely on you being sympathetic towards them. I think she's called Mira Sial. I have no idea how to say that. But she's, I can't remember her name. I swear she's a good character, I just can't remember her name. Come on. Narcine. Narcine's a really good supporting character. I wouldn't mind seeing her as a companion, actually, because she's played by like really good comedic actresses in a lot of things. I wouldn't mind seeing her in like a few other stories as like a reoccurring character. I like the conclusion where it doesn't completely wrap up. It kind of puts the questions aside, which is a bit of an odd way to end it, but yeah, it'd be great to see a sequel story set 1,000 years later. And fun fact, this one's set in 2020, and I don't see any social distancing going on. You get Rory's first death here. Oh my god, it isn't his first death, is it? He dies in Amy's Choice. God, that guy dies a lot. Vincent and the Doctor, what do I need to say? It's a fantastic episode. The life of Vincent van Gogh is a very sensitive topic, obviously, because of his struggles with depression and possibly bipolar disorder. No one's really sure what he had due to the limitations of psychology at the time. But it's handled very sensitively. There's a good bit where the Doctor is about to give a speech where basically Vincent says that he's calls himself mad, and the Doctor's about to give this speech where he's like, well, depression's a very complex condition, and Vincent stops him so he can work. And that's a very good way of handling it, because it would be very easy to have the Doctor give this whole explanation of it, especially to a young audience. It would have been very easy to do that, but that could have come across as quite patronising, and that doesn't happen here. But it's not the Doctor's place to explain Vincent's condition. And it's a lovely ending. The line about life being a pile of good things and bad things resonates with me more and more as I get older, as you do realise that the world isn't just... that life just isn't always good or bad. Sometimes there are bits in between, and all you can do is try to make a lot of the good stuff. It's not heavy on story, but I think that's okay for the topic. And Bill Nye is in it for some reason. I think probably because Richard Curtis wrote this and thought, oh, do you want to appear in this, Bill? But he's good. He's really funny. I love that little look he gives at the end at this sort of a... Wait, what's that? No, it can't be. He's not given a lot of opportunities to be funny here because it's mostly speeches and stuff, but he does a great job. The Lodger, my least favourite of the series, actually. It doesn't really do a lot for me, but it's not terrible. It's basically just Doctor Who doing a buddy sitcom. Is that a thing? Well, the kind of sitcoms that James Corden would have written, actually. But it's fun. It's not exactly like a gutbuster every minute, but there's some really funny stuff there. And James Corden, I don't know what happened with him, because, I mean, he got big in America, and then suddenly everyone in the UK decided he was the worst thing ever, which I think is unfair, because I think he's a very talented guy. He's really good here. I think he plays the everyman really well. That's kind of his go-to character in a lot of this stuff, is just being the everyman or the best friend. And I like his connection with Matt Smith. I love that they brought him back in Series 6 to do a sequel story. It's a shame that in Series 7 they never got around to doing like a third, so they could have like a nice little Craig trilogy. But it's a fun one. It's clearly like a budget-saving episode or a low-budget episode, but they have some fun with it. I kind of like that the problem comes in. I think I counted actually. No, I didn't. Immediately after the TARDIS lands, immediately after the Doctor gets out, the TARDIS just goes haywire, and then there's your conflict. I kind of like just how out of nowhere that is. It's. I counted once. I think it was like it's a solid 5 seconds. Again, it's the weakest of this series in my opinion, but it's not bad. I'll probably pop it in again in the future. I'll probably watch all these again in the future, to be honest. Pandorica opens in the Big Bang, the big finale that ties everything together really, really well. This is a very tight script, this one. It's all these great payoffs and setups throughout. As a kid, this one felt like the biggest story Doctor Who had done so far. I mean, at that point, I hadn't seen a lot of it, but this felt like the biggest scale, because you had every monster coming back. The Doctor was trapped, the universe and multiverse was basically wiped out at the end, because it is pretty much the only thing that's left is Earth. And despite all that, despite the huge scale and all these monsters and all these effects, like all this CGI that still holds up, the spaceships look amazing, it's still a very intimate story. There's a lot there about Amy, about her growing up effectively, and there's a lot about the Doctor too. Because when the Doctor does go into the exploding TARDIS and reboot the universe, he's not just trying to save the universe, he's trying to give Amy her life back, like bring back her parents and give her the life that she was sort of robbed of by the cracks. And he thinks he's going to die, which is, I mean, die in a very loose sense. He's going to be erased from history, but he's willing to do that if it means she gets her parents. There's great location filming. I found out recently that they actually did shoot at Stonehenge, which I didn't think they did. I thought somehow a lot of that would be sealed off, but no, they did film there. I don't think the actual speech was shot there, which is a bit of a shame. Would have been cool to see that. And it's got this great mix of quite kind of hard sci-fi imagery mixed in with this very fantastical tone. So images like Roman autons and the Daleks surrounded by Romans in this like old catacomb with this giant box, like all these great fantastical images that you could only see together in Doctor Who. These are images only Doctor Who could create. These 2 episodes, they were directed by Toby Haynes, who would go on to direct the next 3 episodes along. He did A Christmas Carol and the Series 6 2-parter. But he went on to direct USS Callister for Black Mirror. So this guy's got a real flair for that kind of like effects-heavy sci-fi stuff. I'd love to see him direct more. Like, this guy clearly knows what he's doing. These are beautiful-looking episodes. This time around, I did realise that the Pandorica Opens is definitely the stronger half. But even then, the Big Bang's still a fun hour. Like, it's a good wrap-up to the series. I think the reason I say that is because it's the Big Bang's not a very story-driven episode, it's a very character-driven episode. But even then, there's a lot of exposition, especially in the middle half, where they have to explain how they're going to set the universe back. But here's the thing, the previous episode literally ended with the whole universe being wiped out, so how you follow up on that is going to be difficult, and I think they did a really good job. It starts like it's a completely different story, and then it all kind of ties together. It's a shame that little Amelia's not there more often. I think you probably could have done some cool stuff there with it, like Karen's Amy, like looking at Caitlin Blackwood's Amy and realising kind of how far she's come and how she doesn't need her imaginary friend anymore at this point. There's probably something really cool there, but she disappears because they have to establish that that's what's happening to all of time. Around this time, there was a lot of people complaining the Doctor Who was too complicated, which Stephen Moffat claims he never got any official complaints about that. But I remember at school, whenever I talked to people about Doctor Who, they're like, oh, I find it a bit too complicated. And the thing is, with this story, I didn't get all of it when I was a kid. I didn't entirely get what had happened at the very end, and exactly how the universe had come back. I now understand it as the multiverse is gone, it's just Earth. It's just Earth that's left with the TARDIS. So I didn't get all of it, but I got the emotion behind it. I got all the feelings you're supposed to feel from it. Like, Stephen Moffat once said in like a Doctor Who magazine, or he was quoted as saying, when discussing One Shot from Hellbent, he said something like, the logic is flexible, but the poetry is immutable. It sums up kind of how he tells his stories, where the logic is kind of secondary and almost unimportant in the long run. It's more about the feeling that the imagery elicits. And you get that from this story. Even if you don't fully understand what's going on, you get why it's important for these characters. What Stephen does with this finale really well is he kind of sets it up like it's going to be this huge battle, and then it's not about that. It's not about that at all. It's about Amy and the Doctor. It sets up like it's going bigger, like the Rusty Davis finale is kind of up the scale year on year. So the first year, it's Daleks, it's an army of Daleks in the future. So it's kind of distant from Earth, but it's still pretty big in scale. The next year, Daleks plus Cybermen, present day Earth. The year after, the villain basically wins. And then the year after that, then he does the whole universe ending, multiverse ending epic that is the Stolen Earth. And it's set up like the Pandorica Opens is going to continue in that vein. And it almost does, but then it inverts it. It tells a very personal, very kind of small scale story. I think what this series does better than any other series is it feels like one story. Even though there's all these individual parts to it, it feels like if you turned all this into a storybook, into a fairy tale, which is kind of what it is anyway, that it would flow. It would flow. Like, you'd feel like this is the arc of the series, this is where it begins, this is where it ends, and here are the friends we made along the way, to throw in a meme. I don't think any other series fully captures that for me, like this series, and I think that's why, for now, it's my favourite. There's a lot of other great series of Doctor Who, but this is absolutely my favourite, and I look forward every Saturday to tuning in to watching my Doctor with the Ponds saving the world. And afterwards, I always watch Doctor Who Confidential, the behind the scenes programme, and I remember distinctly watching an episode of that for Flesh and Stone and seeing Stephen Moffat for the first time and just sort of gathering he's like the brains behind all this, the architect behind my childhood Doctor Who. I remember watching him thinking, I want to do that. I want to do something like that. Maybe not writing specifically, but I want to create these worlds. I want to do something in that industry. And that's where I am now. I mean, I'm not actually doing that kind of stuff, but, I'm going to be doing that in the future. I want to get into that industry. And I might not have got there without Series 5, which is just my favourite series of Doctor Who. It's 10 years old, and it still feels as fresh as it did in 2010. So, hope you enjoyed that video. That was just... it took a lot of takes to do this. It's going to be a pain to edit, because the audio is clocking up to about an hour. If you have any memories of Series 5, definitely comment below, share some love about it. If you already like my kind of stuff, definitely check out the Film Academic's YouTube channel, because he does a podcast called The Iceberg Lounge, where he talks about Batman, superheroes, all that good stuff. I just did an episode with him about Michael Keaton possibly, maybe, returning as Batman. It's very funny. I hope you guys like it. So I hope you enjoyed this, and definitely tune in whenever I do another one. So, in the words of the 11th Doctor, Geronimo. I can't think of a way to end this, so I just quoted 11. That's what I tend to do.